Today I am making a watercolor journal from this large pad of paper. First I need to remove the cover sheet, which actually can be used later. This is it's pre-stretched so I can lay down some really wet washes. And I'm going to mix up just some basic primary colors. These are Chinese watercolors actually, and they're very finely ground. And they can be mixed with other watercolors, any brand, but I really like them because they make very fine, very smooth washes. So I'm just using red, yellow, and blue, and I'm going to I'll go fast and I'll just put a very light wash on this watercolor block. After the wash is completely bone dry and all the wrinkles are out, you just need to remove it from the block using your bone folder. And this bone folder is going to come in real handy for the whole project. You will see in a moment, but just remove it from the block. And after the paper's been removed, you might see some black residue from the block, the binding part of the block. You can just trim that. Just trim very slightly that black edge if you wish. Now you're ready to fold the paper. So you just start the fold in one direction. And this paper is pretty thick, so you'll need to use your bone folder to really sharpen the crease. And fold it in one direction. And you'll need to open it up and fold it in the opposite direction. So you will have 4 sections. And again, use that bone folder because it really helps. Now you'll fold it in towards the center, that middle crease. Just fold the long ends towards that center. Make sure that your folds are accurate so that your folded book will be nice and straight. And bring that other side to the center crease. And you'll notice there'll be a grain in the paper. It'll feel harder to fold in one direction than the other, and that's perfectly normal. Just use that bone folder. It comes in so handy. If you don't have a bone folder, then use something dull like the back of a table knife or a spoon, something to burnish it down. And fold it in half one more time to the center. You'll see you'll have 16 sections. And the reason I painted this so you can see it, but also I like having a background for the journaling part. So now I've got all of my sections almost done. Just give it a nice crease. And when you open it, to make a landscape style, there's 2 ways you can do this, but to make a landscape book, you'll need to cut it long ways or vertically rather than horizontally. And so I'm just going to mark the places that need to be cut. I'll just do it with a pencil. And you can erase these, any marks that you might put on your paper with an eraser later. So I'm marking at the top of that last crease and all the way down, and then I'm going to mark at the second crease, or it's actually at the top of the other crease. I'm basically marking where I'm going to cut, and I can use this. I can use scissors or a straight edge, and a blade. But I have a really nice pair of long scissors, so I'm going to use that. You can see I have some marks on that, and I can erase that so easily with my pencil. Now, take the scissors and carefully cut, starting at the bottom of the one side. So this, you can see where the mark is. And I'm just going to cut very straight lines and very carefully. The longer the scissor blades are, the better the cut will be. And like I said, you can use a cutting mat and a straight edge as well. But cut all the way up to that very last crease. Not all the way through the paper, but just to that last crease, right at the very end of that. Turn the paper over and you'll see cutting lines that will start at the bottom and it will go up to just the last crease. And not all the way through, but just to the last crease. Just keep your line straight. And then you'll cut again on the other side where your mark is. And this will be a landscape book. If you want to do a portrait style book, you would just make your cuts in the horizontal direction. Now the book is ready to fold, or ready to collapse and fold. And you can see if you orient it so that the first page kind of opens like a book, and then you just don't make new creases, but you make creases and follow along the creases that are already made and just collapse it into an accordion style book. And it will have a few tint, I guess we call them tints, but it just meanders along and you'll see how it just sort of comes together. And now we have a book. You want to straighten all these little parts out with your bone folder probably. And I noticed there's a tint, this little part right here in the middle. I want to glue those together. So I'm going to take just that center part and I'm going to glue that. I'll leave the other ones alone, but that center will be glued. And I'll just take this is some PVA, which it's a great acid-free glue, and a glue brush. And just going to brush it on one side. Make sure your glue is generous because you really want those to stick. But you don't want it to stick, get it on the other pieces of paper. And now it should just go together very nicely, and that will just kind of make it the book sort of flow a little better. But I will leave those other tints, and those other tints, as we call them, you can insert little signatures and make really fun little surprises in your meandering watercolor journal. So there it is. It's ready I'm ready to put the covers on now. And I like to actually just, while that glue is drying in that center thing, I'll just set it aside and wait for that to dry so I can make my covers. To make the covers, I am using a binder's board by Lineco, and this stuff is super strong and it's thick, so it doesn't warp when you get a lot of glue on it. And the papers I'm using rice paper actually that I have done some jelly printing on. And the reason I love working with rice paper, it has a nice fibers in it, so it really is very strong and it glues nicely onto the boards. and just makes a really nice cover paper. And also for collage and everything else. And I just love this stuff. So I'm just cutting all the way around, about 3/4 of an inch around. I give enough space around the boards. And I'm going to glue the boards first instead of the paper. I'll just use the same glue I used. It's the PVA glue. And I'll put a generous amount of glue onto my binder board. And I don't like to get my fingers glued, so I love using this glue brush. And this is also made by Line Co. It is the smallest one they sell, which I like because I do small projects. It comes in different sizes, but this little guy is very handy. And you just, after you use it, you just wash it with water. And now I'm just going to burnish that rice paper, printed rice paper down onto the board. And since I'm doing two, I might as well do both of them at the same time. There's kind of a fine line in how much glue to use, too. Use a good amount, but not so much that it's just pouring everywhere. The next thing I need to do is I need to miter my corners. And I just cut a little slice off the corner, but I leave, it's not 1/4 of an inch, it's a little under that. But I need to leave, however thick the board is, I need to leave that, at least that thickness of space after the board so that you don't have a raw edge of your board showing. So I just cut the corners off, but just about give some room on the edge of the board so that the board has some paper to cover it. And I will put some glue on all of the edges, and I want to make sure I get it into the side of the board as well. And then I'll just take my glue brush and spread it around. And this is much like when you take the corner or take the edges of the paper and sort of stretch it over and curve it around and go from one side to the other. And then just take your fingers and pinch that little corner in just a little bit. Put some glue on the edge. And that really gives a beautiful finish to your cover. It's really important to do that little step. And just roll it over, and you'll see your edges will be nice and sharp and clean. So now that I have the covers complete, I'm going to glue it to my journal. And since the journal paper is pretty thick, it's a pretty easy process. So I have to just kind of know which page is going to be my front or which cover is going to be my back, and it's just kind of a decision I have to make. And just kind of see which one looks the best. And when I do figure that out, I just make a stack, and I will take my first page, and I need to find something to protect the page. And I usually put it under some paper or something like that. because you don't want glue on any of your other pages. So just the first page, the facing first page of the book, I just put a good amount of PVA glue on it, and I'll just blend it with my brush. And this glue dries fairly fast. If you want to have a slower drying glue just so you can position the covers, you can put some starch paste and mix it with the PVA. But today I'm just going to put this on really fast. Since it's a small book, but if it was a larger one, I would probably put some starch paste also in there. And so now I have it positioned, and my front cover's done. And now I just need to make sure that they line up, the pages line up nicely and they're centered on the cover, because once that glue dries or even sets, it's not moving. So I have that front page, and now I'll just do the same thing on the back cover. Now I'm painting in my little journal. I'm using my favorite paints, just sort of a mix of paint, and then I'm mixing it also. I'm using the Chinese watercolors that I used to create the background wash. I'm mixing with that. So you can see that the Chinese watercolors mix beautifully with any kind of watercolor. And I just love the way it has such a smooth graduation of color. There's no graininess. It's just a beautiful color, and it kind of grabs really nicely onto the paper. And this paper is 140 pound, and it has that background. It's a cold press, and it has that nice soft background that I painted on earlier. And because the Chinese watercolors have a little stronger binder, they don't really lift as easily as European watercolors.